r/askreddit, what's something that's actually in the Bible but most people don't know that it is? Whoever says he loves God but hates his brother is a liar. For if you do not love your brother whom you have seen, how can you love a God whom you do not see? 1 John 4:20. Best of all. Because Hearthstone 4:20. Have you met my brother? When Jesus died, there was an earthquake that cracked open the tombs of dead saints, and when he returned from heaven, or hell, if you're Catholic, they marched to Jerusalem. Matthew 27. I feel like we should skip the bunnies for Easter and dress up like zombie rabbis. And surprisingly, none of the contemporary sources, like Josephus, mention this rather dramatic series of events. The story of Jephthah. I'm surprised how few people know the heartwarming story about the man who sacrificed his own daughter to God in exchange for helping him win a battle. Is that the one where he says he'll offer the next thing that walks out of this house, but then it's his daughter? I don't remember the details that well, but IRC the book doesn't exactly endorse his actions. I know the rabbinic literature is pretty clear that he absolutely should not have done that. A woman cannot teach nor hold authority over men and must remain silent, 1 Timothy 2:12. Has anyone pointed this one out to MTG? Matthew 27:50-54 describes many dead people rising from the grave after Jesus' resurrection and wandering around Jerusalem. A woman kills a guy by nailing him to the ground with a tent stake through his head. All's fair in love and war. Where is this delightful tale, chapter and, if possible, verse? I don't remember that at all, but it sounds like fun. Please help me refresh my memory. Lot's daughters get him drunk so hell bang them and he does. In the story, the children produced by Lot's daughters' incest go on to found the kingdoms of Ammon and Moab. The Ammonites and Moabites were both longtime enemies of Israel. The story was created as a big middle finger to their enemies, essentially calling them incest babies. Deuteronomy 23:1 ESV. No one whose testicles are crushed or whose male organ is cut off shall enter the assembly of the Lord. Deuteronomy 23:1. CBT community in shambles. God is quite specific about who he wants sacrifices from. He once tells Moses that he does not allow people with certain physical defects to sacrifice. No man who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed, no man with a crippled foot or hand, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf, or who has any eye defect, or who has festering or running sores, or damaged testicles. Leviticus 19:19 and Deuteronomy 22:11 prohibits wearing clothes that are made from fabrics that are woven by both wool and linen. Numbers 5:19-22. Instructions on how to perform an abortion. Link. When you forget that your necromancy spell is an area effect, not a targeted one. Looks like Planned Parenthood may have gotten some inspiration from the good book. Satan lives on earth. Job 1:7. 1 John 5:19. 2 Corinthians 4:4. John 14:30. John 12:31. Edit. I included references and still got downvoted LOL. I think the more interesting part of it is that Satan addresses God in heaven and works for God as his agent in Job, whereas that changes in the New Testament. The way the Old Testament seems to have it, demons in general work for God. It was only after being influenced by dualistic religions like Zoroastrianism that the idea of a war between God and Satan developed. The Immortal Jew. Matthew 16:28. And GT, verily I say unto you, there be some standing here, which shall not taste of death, till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. According to the Bible, either there's an immortal Jew kicking around, Jesus already came back and nobody noticed. He did say he'd come back like a thief in the night. The only time abortion is mentioned in the Bible is when and how to perform one. Isaiah 45:7, I am the Lord, and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness, I make peace and create evil. I the Lord do all these things. What? OMG, to go back and tell 12-year-old me that God is quoted as saying he creates evil. My church friends and their leaders would have exploded. In Mark chapter 11, Jesus saw a fig tree. It was out of season and didn't have any fruit to feed him. So he cursed it and it died. I think this is why they say God hates figs. Other gods, some mentioned by their name. Adding to that, Chemosh handed Yahweh his ass with no caveats. Yahweh promised to help the Israelites completely destroy Moab, then some king sacrifices his son to Chemosh and the battle turns against the Israelites and Moab is completely fine. 2 Kings 3. You can see the other part of the story in the Moabite stone, link. One of the most famous passages of the Bible, Judas's betrayal of Jesus, has Judas kissing Jesus to signal to the Roman soldiers which one Jesus was. Which means Jesus looked exactly like every other middle-aged, Middle Eastern man, and not the light-skinned, light brown-haired, blue-eyed GOP Jesus. Reminds me of a meme. You know, you could just point him out to us. Judas putting on chapstick, I don't tell you how to do your job. Leviticus is a guide on how to be a serial killer of women, with justification and ways to make your crime scenes look spicy, for priests. Unicorns. 8 least in the older German Protestant Bibles. Luther mistranslated stuff. Psalm 92:11 for example. Help me out of the lion's mouth and save me from the unicorns. Hilp mir aus dem Rachendel wenn du erit mich von den Einrennern. Obviously they meant narwhals. Usury, also known as banking. Over 100, link references. It's mentioned negatively in both the Old and New Testament. Link. Yep, God made it pretty clear he didn't like bankers or the rich in general. The fact that the Bible is written by humans. A lot of people get stuck on the fact that it's the word of God and kind of forget humans wrote it down. They'll just respond with, it's the inspired word of God. Implying that even though human hands wrote it, it came from God's mind. Some poor bugger probably turned up to his fig tree months later when it was in season and was really sad face. Numbers 31, Moses orders his people to commit genocide but is pissed to find that they allowed the women and children to live. So he tells them to kill the captives but mercifully allows the girls to live so they can be kept as sex slaves. The guy who is sleeping with his dead brother's wife at the instruction of his father, so the family line continues, but he feels bad about it, so he comes on the ground not inside her. God kills him for being deceitful. That was Onan. And this is where an ancient word for masturbation comes from, onanism. So I don't know if masturbation is always bad, or just bad to avoid making your sister-in-law pregnant. Eat shellfish. It's hell for you. Murder, incest, sexism, sodomy, basically everything the Bible's followers claim to be against. Yes, and there are even quotes like you shall not make images. Nader for you, or for your son, or for your slave. So we can assume God was cool with slavery, but not with worshipping images lol. No tattoos. Leviticus. Santa Claus definitely isn't putting you on the nice list if you get a tattoo. Not that year anyway. My favorite is Exodus 4:24-26, where God attempts, and fails, to kill Moses. Saved by his son's foreskin. Lately, I've also been struck by the weird implied theology of Revelation that includes mentioning that the 144,000 are chosen because they haven't sullied themselves with women. It's one of the purest all sexes wrong passages I've seen anywhere in the book. Slaves. Slaves were a normal part of life in biblical time. What Jesus says about homosexuality. When Jesus was in the temple answering questions, what about men who never marry? Some translations say eunuchs. Some are born that way. Some are made that way by man. Abuse. Some choose that way for the glory of the Father. I see that to be priests who can't handle their sexuality, so they try to be celibate. If only the church could listen and accept that homosexuality is natural. Christ says so. 1 Corinthians 11:14, does not even nature teach you that it is a shame for a man to have long hair? What chapters/verses are you referring to? That Lot said his neighbors couldn't rape his visitors, but as a substitute they could have his daughters. Male lions live in nature and have long hair, so there's that. Never saw ashamed male lions though. LOL, yet every painting of Jesus has long blonde hair LMAO. But aren't you not allowed to cut your hair according to the Bible?